This is now part A of part 2, where I'm going to go through some of the real life stories of men who have experienced and given into same-sex attraction. Most of them baptized Catholics. Some of them never stopped practicing their Catholicism, but they did act out on their homosexual desires. And at some point, they decided they wanted to live out fully their devotion to Christ and return to the church. And I want to explain what caused or contributed to their experiencing same-sex desire, what their struggle was like, and how they have managed to remain chaste in the face of some really serious challenges. There are two online videos you can watch. One, I believe, is free, called Desire of the Everlasting Hills. It only features 3 people, 2 males and 1 female, who tell about their same-sex attractions, how they came to experience them, and how they managed to live a chaste life and are living chaste lives. The other one is called the first one, Desire of the Everlasting Hills, is available in many places and is free to watch. The third way, I believe you have to pay something to watch it. It features maybe a dozen individuals telling their stories. Both are extremely affecting. And if you can, I highly recommend that you watch them. One of the persons in the first one, The Desire of the Everlasting Hills, is Paul Darrow. Paul Darrow, as a young man, was absolutely gorgeous. You can tell maybe that he still is. He had thousands of partners. He went to clubs in New York and had, he says, leaders of nations, presidents, have sexual intercourse with him. It's not unusual for homosexual men to have many, many partners, hundreds. I don't know many have had thousands. He was converted by watching Mother Angelica on EWTN. Some of you may know that that's a Catholic TV station that a very lovely, funny, warm, honest nun started and starred on. One day he was flipping channels on TV and he saw her. He was embarrassed that he was watching her, so he flipped the channel again so his partner wouldn't see who he'd been watching. But he kept coming back to her. And he was talking about how God loved everyone, even those who experienced same-sex desire. And he was so taken with that. And he decided to return to the church. He warns against watering down the message of the church. He would not support what Father Martin conveys to those experiencing same-sex attraction. He would not make them think it's okay to have a same-sex partner for whom you have a sexual attraction and a romantic attraction. He says, after the AIDS epidemic claimed around 90% of his friends, a disease he himself narrowly and miraculously escaped, Darrow decided to move to San Francisco for a fresh start. He met his partner Jeff there, and they moved to a cabin in Sonoma County. And that's where he ended up watching Mother Angelica. He says the reason that he remains chaste is that he cannot imagine not receiving the Eucharist. And he doesn't want to do anything that would prevent him from having that intimate union with his Savior. He is devoted to the Eucharist. Hudson Biblo is a fairly young man. He's in, I think, his late 30s, early 40s. He's working very hard to help those who have same-sex attraction to live out their love of Jesus. He says, I was the boy who was different. I played with the girls, longed to wear girls' clothes and longed to be one of them from my earliest memories. I also sought the attention of boys. I wanted them to like me. I wanted to know that I could be liked and thus had value. I didn't like myself and saw myself as a failure because when I was little, I played mostly with my older brother, who always won. I never learned how to win, but only how to lose. I never learned how to come in first, but only second or lower. Only as an adult have I been able to look back and see the effect that this has had on me throughout my life. Now, Hudson doesn't live his life trying to fight his same sex desires. He tries to live his life becoming more and more masculine, observing what masculine men do, and trying to imitate them and have that enter into the deepest part of his being, to actualize actually what is really there in the deepest part of his being. And he does this by pursuing virtue. He realizes that to have virtue, you must control your passions, whether it's a passion for sex or money or power or food or any kind of pleasure, right? Anything that brings one pleasure. And so he has set up a website and has all sorts of ways of helping people. He wants something more beautiful. He said he wants beauty, and virtue is beautiful. And you get these testimonies. You have helped me find freedom. I've broken free of thinking that I was destined to never become a husband to a wife one day. I am in my 60s, and God helped me see through your work that all these years I thought I was gay, I was simply searching for friendship. Another says, for years I had a wall built around my heart, and I was so angry. Chastity and love of people walking along me in that pursuit has brought that wall tumbling down. I am not angry anymore. There's all sorts of themes in here. Self-hatred, anger, despair, desire for friendship, the need for friendship, the need for friends to help you live a life of virtue. There's much more in what Hudson does. And I rather like this fresco of the 7 cardinal virtues. He's seeking virtue. I'm sure you're learning about virtue in your seminary studies. Pay close attention. Right. Another one is Dan Matson. Dan is a very close friend of mine. He had an experience as a young boy of some homosexual interaction with another child in the neighborhood, and later was exposed to homosexual porn. He's been living a chaste life for some time. He's a trombonist in a very fine orchestra and is a beautiful thinker and writer. He says, the greatest question I have had to wrestle with in my life is the question of why God allowed me to be attracted to men. Again, most people who have, maybe all people who have same-sex attraction, don't want it. They didn't choose it. As he says, I didn't choose to be attracted to men, and I certainly didn't want to be. So he was mad at God. Why did God allow this to happen? He said, throughout adolescence, I often prayed to God that he would take away my same-sex attractions, or at least bring into my life a woman who I could love and be loved by and desire enough to marry. He said, I came to view the suffering I experienced because of same-sex attraction in the way Blessed Columba Marmion wrote in a letter of spiritual direction. Blessed Marmion said, your soul is in God's hands. He loves it. He looks upon it unceasingly, and he makes it pass through the states that in his wisdom he sees to be necessary for it. This has become my central conviction surrounding why God allows men and women to live with confusion about sexuality. He said, this is a cross, all right? It's a true cross. He said, to be seen correctly, SSA must always be viewed through the lens of suffering. It is allowed in the world as a tool and scalpel used by God to shape and transform those of us who live with SSA into becoming more and more like Christ. It must be viewed as connected with the cross of Christ, the cross which Christ calls us to pick up and carry daily. These men that I talk to, it's hard to talk about your same-sex attraction as a blessing, but every cross is a blessing. And this cross which they have to carry, which makes them be dependent upon the sacraments, be dependent upon grace, be dependent upon developing an intimate relationship with Jesus, a friendship with Jesus. That's a beautiful cross. Because most of us, that's what all of us should want, is to have an intimate relationship with Christ. And we should turn to the sacraments, and we should become masters of prayer. And unless we have a cross, sometimes we don't do that. We're very comfortable. We're doing well on our own. We don't need God. Well, the person with same-sex attraction really needs God, needs Jesus, needs the sacraments, needs grace, even desperately, right? To avoid self-hatred, to avoid falling into terrible sin. But those things that throw us into God's arms are blessings. That's a strange thing to say, but that's how those who achieve chastity understand what has happened to them. So here is Simeon helping Christ carry his cross. And we need to help our brothers and sisters with same-sex attraction carry their crosses. There's lots of crosses in this world: mental illness, diseases and handicaps, poverty, living under oppression, no religious freedom, being a refugee, being infertile, suffering the death of a spouse, child, friend, or grandparent, not finding a suitable spouse. Homosexuality needs to be put on that list, right? It's a cross. The action is an abomination. It's something that offends God enormously. But God is not offended by those who experience same-sex attraction. He knows that those are crosses. He wants to help them, and he wants us to help them. Corinthians 1:4 says, 2 Corinthians 1:4 says, he comforts us in all our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. Those who experience same-sex attraction can become tremendous sources of comfort to others when they have successfully achieved chastity. They have had, again, to discipline themselves. They have had to throw themselves into the arms of God the Father, like the prodigal son, come back and said, take care of me. I can't do this on my own. Help me. And God does help. And those with same-sex attraction help others. Dan Matson, again, wrote this book, Why I Don't Call Myself Gay. It's not his identity. He is a son of the Father. He experiences same-sex attraction, but he is a male, and he is a masculine person who needs to live a life in a masculine way. I have another friend who's been fighting these attractions since he was a teenager. He's had a very hard time. He's never really left the church, maybe now and then, but he's got his foot in the church all the time. He suffered enormously from thinking that God hated him. God could not possibly love him because he let him become gay. And God could not possibly love him because of the depraved activity into which he fell. He has a couple brothers. They also were homosexual. He had a brutal father, a father who always insulted his sons, demeaned them, put them down. And he had an older cousin who sexually abused him when he was a teenager. Why do I have this picture? That's not my friend. That's just a stock picture, but a man with a dog. My friend has 3 dogs, and he lives more or less as a hermit. He lives in the countryside. He takes care of his dogs. He works from home, works out at the gym, goes to daily mass, lives near family, so he can have a social life with his family. But he doesn't much trust himself in a lot of situations where he might be attracted to men. So he needs to stay very, very close to the sacraments and to his family. This is another amazing person, Andy Kamitsky. Andy grew up, I think, one of 5 boys. The other 4 were very heterosexual. chased after women, etc. But they were all Christians and knew they should live a chaste life. And Andy experienced same-sex attraction. I don't know the real story behind that. But his brothers challenged him and he said, you need to be chaste too. And it ended up that Andy fell in love with a woman. Never got rid and still hasn't gotten rid of his same-sex attraction. He does love this woman. He's been faithful to her through decades of marriage. They have 5 children, I believe. He runs a whole group that ministers to those who have sexual problems, not just those who have same-sex attraction, but to those who are unfaithful and masturbate and look at pornography and have difficulties in their marriage, all right, engage in sinful activities within marriage. Andy works through parishes and helps all these people. I'll say more about his program later, but I'm thinking maybe this is a program that priests in Uganda would want to learn about and institute in their parishes. His group is called Desert Stream, living waters that come out of the desert. Those who have same-sex attraction generally feel enormously lonely. They believe their relationships with women are skewed and their relationship with males are skewed, that no one really wants to be their friends, that their families are ashamed of them. And they need living waters. They need something that heals them, and so they can feel God's love. Another story is that of Ken Williams. Ken Williams is an evangelical. He's even an evangelical preacher. And Ken has written this beautiful book, The Journey Out, How I Followed Jesus Away from Gay. You can tell he's with a woman. He's married. He's been successfully married for 17 years, has 4 sons. He is free of same-sex desire at this point in his life. But he always loved Jesus from the time he was a small boy. He remembers at 7 giving his life to Jesus. But when he was 8, he and his friends stumbled across some same-sex homosexual pornography. He said it was disgusting in the extreme. He said, but being small boys, he said they kind of acted out some of it with each other. And later, as he went through puberty, he started feeling same-sex attraction. And then one of his friends molested him. Ken fell into huge self-hatred because he knew that what he was drawn to and what he was doing were not in accord with God's will. He was ready to commit suicide. A fair number of homosexual men attempt to commit suicide. More think of committing suicide, and some actually do. Why? Self-hatred, thinking God hates them. Well, Ken was trying to figure out a way to commit suicide so that he didn't traumatize his family. But he wrote a letter to himself, basically, trying to explain to himself what was it that he was experiencing with same-sex attractions. And he decided to show it to a man who had been his youth minister at the church. And this man said, this is not who you are. You are not gay. You are a beloved son of God the Father. Now, his mentor knew that same-sex activity is wrong. And he took Ken to the pastor, and the pastor said, we don't know how to help you with this, but we are going to help you with this. So the first thing he did was put him in contact with an older man in the congregation who was a married man, but he was able to meet every Saturday morning with Ken and have breakfast and talk to him about how much God loved him and how much he needed to get close to Jesus and that Jesus would help him with his struggle. He never intended to get married. He didn't know. He was working on his same-sex attraction, which was progressively going down as he made better friendships, as he understood more the love of God had for him, as he understand more the source of this, that he hadn't chosen this. It was something that happened because of things that happened in his childhood. And he observed this beautiful woman one day at a church function and thought, maybe she will talk to me. And they talked and really enjoyed each other. And he said, maybe she'll go out with me. And she went out with him. And he told her everything he experienced. And she decided that she could trust him. He was attracted to her. She was attracted to him. They got married, and they've been happily married. This does not happen all that often, but it does happen. And it's not something that men should not hope for. Some men with same-sex attraction said they just actually can never imagine it. They've been so deeply, you might say, corrupted in their being, what happened to them. But others, it's something they can do. There are stories of several in this book, The Journey Out. And I mentioned Andy Comiskey is one of those. All right, well, next time we're going to have part 3. And in part 3, I'm going to talk about the typical patterns of real life stories. I'm going to flesh out what is a compassionate response to homosexuality. I'm going to talk about an organization named Courage, and I'm going to say more about the organization called Living Waters. So thank you. I look forward to speaking with you next time.